Hi, welcome to Motivational Monday.
Hi.
Today we're going to be talking about suicide awareness, as Suicide Prevention Day is September 10th, which is this past Sunday. So we are going to be talking about that, and I have my sister here.
Hi.
She's going to be asking questions to kind of help people understand the perspective of someone who is dealing with suicide thoughts or even attempts. I don't know what the questions are, so you've been warned.
I make no promises for the questions quality, okay? Um okay. Would you say it was a sudden or like a gradual thought process that built up to wanting to make an attempt?
For me, it was um, kind of an ongoing scenario. It wasn't all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but it was different phases, whether it was an active thought or it was more of a dormant process.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember as far back as when I was maybe like 6, where this was an issue for me. And then I didn't really have the issue again until high school, then again in college, and then a little bit after college as well. So it wasn't necessarily um, gradual. It was. Are you asking about in that moment or
What
at
led
all?
up to that moment?
Sometimes it can be gradual.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes life just becomes overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
um, and those kind of thoughts just start basically smacking you in the face.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that it was kind of a what's the word? Sporadic, is that the right word for it?
Yeah, it was rather for me. It was sporadic,
Mm-hmm.
um, because like I said, it was in different. I mean, we're talking about years apart, where
Right.
I had these instances. So when I was about 6 or 7, I actually attempted. Um, I remember I laid on the edge of the bed, and it was my plan to have all of the blood rush to my head. Obviously, that's not how things work, but at that time,
Mm-hmm.
it was with the intention of taking an attempt on my life. Outside of that, I only had the thoughts, not necessarily attempts.
Mm-hmm. Um, what would you say brought you out of that state of mind or helped you overcome those state of mind?
Finding something to live for. Um, and I think that came with, I just had to find something.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, it was, I've always wanted to have kids. And so I knew if I were to end my life, then I would be missing out on the one experience that I've been looking forward to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then beyond that, it's all the dreams and the goals that I've placed in my life and wanting to see them come to reality, and just determining in my heart that I have more to do on this earth than what I've already accomplished,
Mm-hmm.
and that I never wanted to. Well, I don't want to shortchange what life has to offer for me.
Okay.
But I'm sorry, but it did take a while to get there. A long, long while. I would say like 20 plus years
Mm-hmm.
to actually get to a place where I can honestly say, even when things are getting as difficult as they may, I've not had the desire to end it for years.
Okay. Did you think that talking or venting about what was going through your mind, do you think that helped at all? Or if you would have preferred not to say anything?
It really depends on who I guess you're talking to,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of times people who don't get it don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, a lot of times the responses are very cliche, like it'll get better, and you don't want to do that, and
Speaking without any basis.
speaking without basis, or sometimes speaking with too much judgment, or sometimes making assumptions. Or if I called a vent to someone and they take over the conversation with their opinions, their solutions, their advice without even hearing out what I need. Um, in all of the moments that I've suffered with depression and suicide, very rarely do people say, "What is it that you need?" But people are quick to tell you what you need. People are quick to tell you what to do. People are quick to throw their suggestions down your throat without really taking a moment to say, "You're hurting. What can I do to help?" Very rarely does that happen. And I think if we make that a reflex response and just taking the time to listen,
as opposed to saying it's okay, it will be all right.
Because at that moment, it's really not even effective.
It's one is being productive and one is just saying things to get over with it.
Right. And I think it comes from a place of, it takes a lot of humility to think you have the right answer and still say, maybe I don't. I may have the answer that what works for me, but only you have the answer for what works for you.
Right.
So if I stop and say, how can I help you? What do you need? What do you need from me? What do you need from what will make this better? Because you probably have that answer in your head. And at that moment, the answer may feel like, the only logical answer may feel like just ending it. But it can't get better if you end it. That is just the reality of it. But I think people who have someone who's hurting in their lives, the best thing you can do is take a moment and just ask them, what is it that you need?
So would you say that what would you consider the one most important thing to get over that hurdle?
Self-love. And I think the more I've begun to truly love myself, the less I have slipped into suicidal thoughts. I've still dealt with depression, but those moments don't last as long and they don't feel as heavy. And I think not only just loving yourself, but you have to get to know yourself too. You have to get to know, what are your triggers. You have to get to know, when this starts to happen, I'm at risk for the depression and the suicide to come about. And so once you understand that, you're able to, prevent it to a degree. And you can handle it a little bit differently. And when you know it's just your depression talking and it's not how you really feel, you begin to see the issues a little differently. You realize that this is just how I feel right now, but
this is just the moment.
Yeah.
Questions I have.
So I do want to go back to the question when you were saying about talking and venting. So, and I want to kind of share how Nicoles Network kind of became a thing and where it all began. And it kind of was around this subject. So I've dealt with suicide and depression. I mean, at this point, we're talking 18 years that it's been around in my life. And I was in a course, a development class at church, and one of the ladies in the course had got up in front of the group and basically mentioned that her daughter was suffering from depression and suicide, and she was basically just asking people to pray for her and her daughter. And so after the class, I went up to her. I said, I've dealt with depression, I've dealt with suicide. If I can help in any way, just let me know.
Right.
And so a couple weeks later, she called and she said her daughter had been date raped, and it triggered severe depression, and it triggered some of her suicidal feelings as well.
Mm-hmm.
And she just didn't know how to help her daughter. And she was like, I feel like every time I say anything, um, it makes it worse. And everything I say to her just makes it worse. And so I just tried to explain to her from her daughter's potential perspective, because I didn't know her daughter. But just knowing how I felt in that moment and what I needed and what I couldn't even communicate, but understanding how her daughter feels and being able to explain that to the mother, because the mother had never dealt with depression or suicide to that extreme. And so she didn't really get it. She didn't understand it. So being able to use my experiences and speak that and really have a deep conversation, as you know, and this is an older lady, me and her daughter are probably similar age, but being able to speak to her and say, try this, consider this. Maybe what she's really saying is this. When she says this, maybe this is why she's saying it. This is the pain that she's speaking from. And she actually left the conversation with you and I, and she said, you know, I need to apologize to my daughter, because she realized that she was forcing her advice down her throat, and she realized that she was telling her daughter what she would suggest for herself, and not and never took that moment to say, what do you need? And it turns out the solution was they spent the day and watched TV. They watched movies all day together. They ended up going shopping together, and that was what the daughter needed, was just to spend some time not talking about it, not woe is me having that moment, but just having fun together was what she needed, and to enjoy that. And so I say all that to say that that was the moment where I realized I need to tell my story. And if me telling my story helps even just one person, it made all of the years of suffering through depression and suicide worth it to me. And because of that, I'm committed to being transparent and being honest and telling my story to whoever is willing to listen, whether that's through the video blogs, through the book, through workshops that I'm hosting, all of that with the intent of supporting people who are hurting and helping them get to a better place. Any last minute questions?
I don't think so. You've covered a
lot. So if anyone has any other questions, I'd be happy to discuss in the comments as well. If you have someone who is in your life who is suffering, the best advice I can give you is to ask them what they need, and minimize any judgment that you may feel natural. Like, why would you feel that way? Why do you think that's the right thing to do? Why would you kill yourself just to get away from this problem? Try not to take that perspective. Instead, understand that they're hurting and that they need support and they need love and they need understanding. So listen and ask them what they need. And if you are struggling with depression or suicide, I suggest seeking help. Some of the things that have helped me were therapy, church, and journaling. And they really do help me stay grounded and minimize the suicidal thoughts, as well as when I do hit into a depressed state, they don't last as long, because I have the processes in place to help me maintain a little bit better. All right, thank you.
Thank you.